The Salem witch hunt was not triggered by ergot poisoning, encephalitis, Lyme disease, religious zeal, real witchcraft, demonic possession, a delusion of the devil, or even hysteria. Welcome to the Salem Witch-Hunt Daily Report for Saturday, February 10th, 2024. I'm Josh Hutchinson. This weekend, I want to talk to you about the origins of the Salem Witch-Hunt, as many theories have been proposed. And we're going to evaluate as many as we can in the next 2 days. Specifically in this episode, I will talk about what did not cause the Salem witch trials. And tomorrow I will talk about what actually did help contribute to the Salem witch trials. The leading contenders for what did not cause the witch hunt have one thing in common. They seek to reduce a complicated series of events to a single point of focus. They're convenient but hollow explanations that tend to avoid scrutinizing the realities of everyday human nature and instead pin the blame on special factors, avoiding the hard truth that special factors don't need to be present for a witch hunt to even happen. One could kick off literally at any moment, and they do all the time, everywhere. In reality, we don't need extenuating circumstances in order to be awful to each other. Just look around. As I mentioned at the top, the Salem witch hunt was not caused by ergot poisoning. This theory that the afflicted or bewitched persons in Salem and other communities were poisoned by the ergot fungus, which can grow on grain, including rye, was actually debunked shortly after its announcement in the April 2nd, 1976 issue of Science magazine. In the original article, Linda Corporeal proposed that the afflicted persons were suffering convulsions and seeing visions due to the effects of ergotism, which can cause mania and psychosis. However, this hypothesis does not hold up under scrutiny. If ergot was present in the rye eaten by a household, every member of that family would have been poisoned because they're all eating the same bread. This was not the case in the Salem Village parsonage, where only 2 of the 4 children and 1 of the 4 adults in the minister's home became ill. Samuel Parris did not get sick. His wife did not get sick. His son Thomas did not get sick. Daughter Susanna did not get sick. Tituba did not get sick. John Indian got sick. Abigail Williams, Betty Parris, they got sick. 3 out of 8 people in that home. And similar scenarios played out in other homes where select individuals suffered the fits described in the witch hunt records. In addition, the effects of ergotism cannot be controlled, and there is evidence that the afflicted persons were actually quite well in between court appearances and nightmares. Finally, not all the symptoms are described by the witch trial records, which omit any indication of gangrene, blight, or death following the onset of the other symptoms. I also said the witch hunt wasn't triggered by encephalitis or Lyme disease. Indeed, no single disease explains away all the afflictions of the more than 70 supposedly bewitched persons. That's right. In this book here by Marilyn K. Roach, The Salem Witch Trials, a day-by-day chronicle of a community under siege, there is an appendix which lists some 74 individuals who were afflicted. If you read through the records of the Salem witch hunt, you'll see that they had different symptoms at different times or different circumstances of the onset, etc. They basically were suffering different things, and encephalitis and Lyme disease, the symptoms just don't really match up with what we saw in Salem. So if we aren't going to look for medical explanations, what's next? Religious zeal? Well, compared to other religions, Christianity and Puritanism in particular is not necessarily more or less zealous than others to eliminate witchcraft than any other. Indeed, witch hunts have occurred and continue to occur in all parts of the world and within all belief systems. In addition, Puritans began coming over to New England in the 1620s, yet the first witchcraft cases didn't emerge until the late 1640s, although the first wave of Puritans were arguably the most zealous in the zealousness diminished over time, or at least that was the complaint of those people in the second and third and fourth generation, was that their people were slipping away from the ideals that had guided the creation of the Massachusetts Bay Colony and the other New England colonies. And then we have to ask, why didn't they hunt witches in that first generation if they were the most zealous? Why is it that Salem occurred after the majority of the earliest generation had died off? And in terms of combating witchcraft, religion is an important driver of behavior in how you go about actually working against what you see as this evil force. But all that's necessary for a witch hunt is a basic belief that witchcraft is real and is a life or death threat. And that belief can stem from anywhere. And you even see that witchcraft can be substituted out for some other quality or action or behavior. Then tomorrow, we're going to look at how religious tension played a larger role in the witch trials than religious belief or zeal itself. In fact, it was community divisions and friction that exacerbated the conditions that resulted in the witch trials. More on that tomorrow. Some also theorize that the Salem witch trials were caused by real witchcraft. While there's certainly evidence for magical practices among the New England settlers, and specifically among a small subset of those accused of witchcraft, none of the victims was convicted of these harmless practices, which typically involve divination or counter magic, usually to protect or heal. Indictments and convictions for witchcraft came for two things: for using magic to harm people and for covenanting with the devil. You look at every one of the indictments in the records of the Salem witch hunt, they're either for afflicting a person or they're for being in league with the devil, which was all part of one belief that they had in what witches were. The official doctrine of the time was that witches obtained their powers through the devil and only upon signing over the deeds to their souls. All of this is to say that the witchcraft allegedly practiced back then was not possible, as nobody has been able to prove a devilish contract. While it's possible some New Englanders believed themselves truly to be magical practitioners, in fact, it's likely that people like Samuel Wardwell, who were known far and wide as fortune tellers and diviners, considered themselves to be magical practitioners. But very, very few people would have considered themselves to be witches. So using the definition of the day, I have to say the witch trials were not caused by actual witchcraft. Also, there's a difference between this diabolical witchcraft, which the word witchcraft, that as I'm using it here, just means this negative, evil concept of using magic to harm. It does not represent the forms of witchcraft which are practiced today in the neo-pagan communities. Demonic possession is also posited as an answer to the witch trials. Bill O'Reilly talks a lot about demonic possession in his book, Killing the Witches. And well, demonic possession is a psychosocial construct and also an explanation of convenience. In other words, possession is unproven and merely used as a crutch of an explainer to fill in the gaps of our own knowledge. Whether you're skeptical of possession like I am, or you're a believer, it remains true that the people of the time and place we're talking about had their own particular understanding of how possession worked, and they classified conditions of persons who were suffering as either, a natural disease, a bewitchment, or a possession by a demon or the devil himself. And based on their own understanding of possession, they didn't believe that the afflicted or bewitched persons were possessed. They believed that they were being tormented by witches, not directly by the devil. Now, the diabolical delusion or illusion theory isn't as popular as it was in the early years after the trials, but it still comes up as a theory in social media discourse. Basically, this theory holds that Satan is real and that he directly intervened to play the New Englanders against each other by having some believe the others were witches. Like the last two theories, this one cannot be proven unless you can get the devil to sit in a courtroom and show you his book. The last theory I want to examine today is hysteria. While there are certain elements of truth here, the bottom line is that the colonists behaved utterly rationally within the confines of their legal, religious, and social order. Certainly, fear was a driving force in the witch hunt, and we'll talk about that much more tomorrow. However, hysteria implies uncontrolled fear, and that does not seem to be present in Salem in 1692. Aside from Mary Esty, suspects overwhelmingly were not rounded up in the dark of the night. The constables instead rode out to the houses of the accused after the sun had risen, and they'd enjoyed a reasonable breakfast. Mobs of pitchfork and torch-armed citizens didn't crowd the streets. While the courts deviated from usual practice and procedure in some ways, including allowing spectral evidence, the basic rules were generally followed. A suspect was complained of, a warrant issued, the suspect arrested, an examination held. Physical searches were made of the home and the body of the suspect. The suspect was remanded into custody. And then a period of weeks to months went by before the suspect was called before the grand jury. All this time, the village wasn't tearing down the jail, trying to get these people out and execute them themselves. This wasn't a panic-fueled orgy of murder. This was an organized, if not horribly deficient, legal process. So thank you for watching today's Salem Witch-Hunt Daily Report. Tune in tomorrow when we learn the secret of what actually did cause the Salem Witch-Hunt.